In March 2023, a man named Sunil Kavuri sat in a conference room in London. He had flown in to attend a creditors' meeting, one of thousands of people waiting to find out how much of their money they would ever see again. Sunil had put most of his savings into FTX, not because he was reckless, because he had done the research. He had read the interviews. He had watched the founder testify before Congress. He had trusted the responsible adult in the room. That man was Sam Bankman-Fried. And in November 2022, Sunil opened his phone, tapped withdraw, and waited. The button was still there. The balance was still visible, but the money didn't move. $8 billion. Gone. Not stolen in a hack, not erased by a market crash. Gone because of something far more calculated. It was never really there. Before we go any further, here is exactly what this video is going to give you. By the time this ends, you will understand how $8 billion actually moved, where it went, who absorbed it, and why the exact conditions that made this possible are operating somewhere right now. Not crypto conditions, human conditions. This is not a story about tokens. This is a story about how trust becomes a weapon, and how the weapon gets rebuilt after every collapse. Let's start with the man who built it. Sam Bankman-Fried was not supposed to be a villain. MIT graduate, quantitative trader, effective altruist. A man who openly said he was making money to give it away. In a space filled with anonymous founders and aggressive speculation, he cultivated something rare: credibility. He testified before the Senate Banking Committee. He called for regulation. He spoke about consumer protection. He wore a t-shirt and cargo shorts to Washington. It was a performance. And the audience, regulators, investors, media, applauded. By 2022, FTX was valued at $32 billion. It had naming rights to an NBA arena, celebrity endorsements, institutional backing, a Super Bowl commercial. The message was simple. Crypto needed a responsible adult. FTX was that adult. But behind that image, something very different was happening. To understand FTX, you need to understand a second company, Alameda Research. Officially, Alameda was separate, independent, run by a different team. In reality, it was the other half of the same operation. FTX took customer deposits, real dollars, real crypto, money that was supposed to sit in segregated accounts, available for withdrawal at any time. Instead, the money moved, quietly, continuously, without customer knowledge. It was transferred to Alameda, which used it for high-risk trades, leveraged bets, speculative positions that required enormous liquidity. The structure had one fatal flaw. Much of Alameda's collateral was not cash. It was FTT, a token created by FTX itself. The collateral keeping the entire system stable was a coin that only had value because the system was stable. If FTX collapsed, FTT was worthless. If FTT was worthless, Alameda collapsed. If Alameda collapsed, FTX collapsed. A circle with no exit. Here's what that structure meant in practice. Somewhere in Florida, a retired teacher named Barbara had $34,000 on FTX. She had moved her savings there after watching a televised interview with the founder. He had talked about safety, custody, regulatory compliance. She wasn't in crypto. She believed she was using a regulated financial platform, because the man in the interview made it sound exactly like that. When withdrawals froze in November 2022, Barbara's account showed her balance. The number was still there, the number meant nothing. The money she saw on screen was a record of a claim, not a record of an asset, because the asset had already been moved. On November 2nd, 2022, a document surfaced, a leaked balance sheet from Alameda. It showed that Alameda's stability was built largely on FTT, not diversified liquid assets, not deep reserves, a coin created by its sister company. The implication was immediate. If FTT dropped, Alameda's collateral collapsed, which meant FTX's liquidity collapsed, which meant customer funds were effectively gone. And here's what most people still believed at that moment: that withdrawals would resume, that this was temporary, that institutions would step in. They didn't understand yet that the structure had already collapsed. 4 days later, Binance announced it would liquidate its FTT holdings. The announcement was calm, strategic, and devastating, because the signal was clear. Someone very large, with very good information, was getting out. What followed was textbook, a bank run, but digital. No lines outside buildings, no crowds, just millions of people alone tapping the same button. Withdraw, withdraw, withdraw. $6 billion requested in 72 hours. FTX didn't have it. The money had been moved. And then the message appeared: withdrawals temporarily suspended. In that moment, the illusion ended. November 11th, 2022, FTX filed for bankruptcy. Sam Bankman-Fried resigned. The restructuring was handed to John Ray III, the same executive who handled Enron. In his first filing, he wrote that he had never seen in his entire career such a complete failure of corporate controls. No reliable financial records, no independent oversight, no proper separation between customer funds and company funds, billions handled through informal channels, key decisions undocumented. This wasn't incompetence. Incompetence doesn't build a $32 billion company. This was intentional opacity, because records create accountability. And accountability was the one thing the system couldn't survive. In November 2023, Sam Bankman-Fried was convicted on 7 counts of fraud and conspiracy. In March 2024, he was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. For many people, that felt like closure. A villain identified, a sentence delivered, a narrative completed. But the verdict didn't change the incentives. FTX wasn't built in isolation. It was built inside a system that rewarded speed over scrutiny, valuation over verification, branding over transparency. Investors wanted exposure. Celebrities wanted endorsement fees. Users wanted yield. Regulators wanted to appear informed. Everyone benefited as long as confidence held. The conviction addressed one person's choices. It didn't change the conditions. If you think this story was about crypto, you've missed the pattern. This wasn't about tokens. It was about incentives and systems built on trust without verification. Money doesn't disappear, it moves. When FTX collapsed, the money didn't vanish into air. In bankruptcy court, customer claims were frozen. Assets were sold to cover secured obligations first. Venture investors wrote off their equity. Competitors absorbed market share. Market makers repositioned. The redistribution followed legal hierarchy, and the people at the bottom of that hierarchy are still waiting. As of today, many creditors are still navigating the recovery process. Some will recover a percentage, some will recover less, some will never fully close the psychological cost of what happened. That is how financial crises work, not disappearance, redistribution. Sunil still attends creditor meetings, still reads filings, still waits. He did everything right. He researched, he verified, he watched the founders speak to senators. And it didn't matter, because the system was designed to look exactly like the thing it wasn't. The real question isn't how FTX collapsed. The mechanics are documented. The real question is, how many systems today operate on confidence alone? How many platforms hold assets you believe are sitting safely somewhere? How many structures depend entirely on trust without verification? And if one of them cracked tomorrow, would you see it coming? Or would you just open your phone, tap withdraw, and wait? FTX collapsed in 2022. The conditions that built it still exist. Episode 2. A threat that doesn't require exchanges, doesn't require tokens, doesn't require market crashes. AI voice technology so precise that people transfer money after hearing a voice they trust. A parent, a spouse, a CFO, and they never realize it wasn't real until it's too late. Money doesn't disappear, it moves. If any of this landed, subscribe to Ledger Dark, not because of an algorithm, because the next case is already being built, and it follows the same pattern. If this video made you think, like it. It's the only way this kind of content reaches the people who need to see it. Now, tell us in the comments, which case do you want us to follow next? Another exchange, a hedge fund, a government contract, a name everyone trusts. The money is always moving. The question is whether you're watching.